Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm your host, Douglas Gabriel, and I'm here with Michael McKibben, the researcher of researchers, and today I had the honor. I went down into the mines with him, and with his pickaxe and his hammers, and I don't know all these tools he was using, he pulled up things right in front of my eyes that blew my mind. Things about the Clinton Foundation that shows that there is so much collusion that everyone on the Mueller team should recuse themselves because of their conflict of interest. And so then he went even deeper, and he found out something that I want to ask why the other Clinton Foundation investigations never found, what Michael McKibben and his researchers found and demonstrated to me while I was down in the mines with him. So what he is going to reveal today is a bit shocking. It's kind of a missing piece to the puzzle. It's like that... it's the missing link. And he did it again with technology because, as you know, he is the founder of Leader Technologies, which is the group that invented social media and scalability of social media. So what he reveals to you today might be the piece that, if it's like it was for me, a piece that I've been waiting for years and years to finally get a speck of truth out of investigating the Clinton Foundation. Michael, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Douglas. Great to talk to you today.
Now, I don't know. Which bomb do you want to drop on our head first? The Jeannie Ray? You want to drop Hillary's Foundation? You want to drop Invisible Ink?
Yes, we found that the 2017 version of the Form 990 that the Clinton Foundation files with the IRS looks like they screwed up and they did not completely conceal their contributors. And one of those of the 8 contributors that were masked, we discovered that the names of those contributors weren't blanked out as they have been from 97 up till 2016, but in fact they were masked with what I'll call hidden ink. In other words, it's the digital version of disappearing ink. But the fact is, underlying the form on that page were the actual names of the contributors, which we were able to unpack. And these were 8 contributors that donated a total of almost $11 million. And the names were quite interesting. One was Elevate Social Businesses, which is a new name for the Clinton Justra initiative. The second was an odd one, and it was the National Lottery of the Netherlands. Third one of particular interest related to the Mueller probe was Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund. The fourth was Wasserman Foundation, not the Wasserman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but this is the Wassermans from Hollywood. The next one was the Norwegian Agency for Development Corporation, which is run by the Foreign Ministry of Norway. The next one was the Inter-American Development Bank. Number 7 was the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and 8 was Digicel, which manages wireless telephones all over basically the second and the third world. So we saw these names for the first time ever. Now, if you go back to the earlier years, we're talking about contributions in the 50 to 60, 100 million range where the contributor was left blank. So my first conclusion, just thinking somewhat humorously, is there's all this noise about President Clinton or President Trump submitting his tax returns. Well, it would seem that if he's going to be asked to do that, then the Clinton Foundation needs to be unmasking all of these contributors that they have blocked out of all their previous tax returns going all the way back to 1997. So that's one thing. But of particular note is the investment by Fidelity, not investment, but donation by Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund in 2017 for $1,550,000. Now, the the issue there is the fact that this proves with primary evidence that Fidelity Investments and the Clinton Foundation have a relationship. And why is that important? Because if you start looking at the financial disclosures of the different parties that are involved with the Mueller probe, and for example, the recent arrest of Roger Stone and the indictment of Roger Stone, what we see here is that most of the parties that are attacking Roger Stone from the special prosecutor's office also have Fidelity Investments themselves. I'm going to stop there and let you comment.
No, that's significant because, as you have pointed out to us, that they should have basically recused themselves or certainly have stated their possible conflict of interest, or basically just known that they certainly were part of a scheme that was being hidden because, as we can see on these Clinton Foundation IRS forms, they have hidden the information, either the name of the donor, because that would be the name of a nation, a country that donated to her while she was the Secretary of State, which would have broken the emolument clause, or they block out the amount. But what you did, and I don't know if it might have flown over people's head, but once again, you looked so carefully. You looked at everything so many times that you looked underneath it. And what did you find underneath it? You found they made a mistake on just 1 year.
Yeah.
But that 1 year
Yes.
is enough to sink the Mueller special counsel investigation because of Fidelity.
Absolutely it is. Let me tell you why. Because Judge Amy Berman Jackson, who was assigned to be the judge in the Roger Stone indictment, has 4 holdings in Fidelity. Chief Justice John Roberts has 17 holdings in Fidelity in the 2012 financials. James Comey has 2 holdings, and Rod Rosenstein has 18 holdings. So if we look back to the genesis of this special counsel prosecution, the first one who should never have been present in any involvement with this activity would have been Rod Rosenstein, who has 18 holdings in Fidelity. Those holdings give him a direct conflict of interest with the Clinton Foundation, and therefore anything related to the subject of the Clintons would have disqualified him as a party. And yet he was silent, and he went ahead and he then appointed Robert Mueller. Now, from the only financial report we have of Mueller, we don't see any Fidelity investments, but we do see a lot of Vanguard investments, which is another heavy contributor to the Clinton Foundation. But we'll just leave that aside for a minute. And we also see that James Comey should never have been involved in any manner because of his Fidelity holdings. And FYI, Leonard P. Stark, who was the district court judge in our case with Facebook, he holds massive. He has 7 holdings in Fidelity. So what we see here is this constellation of parties who have a common investment in a company that donated heavily to the Clinton Foundation. And therefore, none of them, if they were actually following the ethics laws to which they agreed when they became employed by our federal government, should never have ever touched these cases. So from my point of view, what it tells me is that because Rod Rosenstein did not recuse himself, and because he then picked Robert Mueller as the special counsel, the entire activity of the special counsel has been tainted by that fraud. That's what this says. And then Judge Amy Berman Jackson should have never taken the case as the judge because of her Fidelity holdings. So you can't get much worse in terms of actual conflicts of interest. Forget all the stocks that their different funds and holdings had in Clinton Foundation donors, which in the case of Amy Berman Jackson was about 40% of the top stocks in her other mutual funds were all Clinton Foundation donors. So we see a massive fraud here. Massive.
Absolutely. And it's over and over and over again. And they can't play like they don't know by saying, oh, it's in the mutual funds. I didn't know. Yes, they know because some of them invested specifically in Fidelity, not just through mutual
Correct.
funds, but very, very, very specifically. And when you then find out that Fidelity controls hundreds of other companies, corporations, and that they give to the Clinton Foundation just in the year that you've discovered, 2017, when everything had calmed down, $1 million, you can expect that in the previous years they gave a whole lot more. And Fidelity represents a lot of corporations that are multinational, which would then bring in the entire, this is foreign investment, this is foreign investment, this is foreign meddling. These judges, again and again, have their money in the corrupt companies, Vanguard, Fidelity, Facebook, any of the Silicon Valley cardboard cutout warlord tech kings. They know ahead of time. They should simply not be allowed to do these kind of investments because it's all about insider trading because decisions they make control them. How about telling them a little bit about a tiny bit of the conflict of interest with Rod Rosenstein's wife, Lisa Barsumian, and then later come back and please tell us that there is also another huge conflict of interest with Jeannie Ray.
Well, Lisa Barsumian appears to have never had a real job. She's always worked for the Department of Justice in one form or another. But when you start looking at the activities of her boss when she was at the DOJ and her own activities, we see maybe 100 cases where she is assisting in the representation of the FBI, the CIA, of various officials, the Clintons, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. Those are all reasons why. I just lost my train of thought. These are all reasons why Rod Rosenstein had no business even touching this case, because his conflicts of interest are off the charts. Now ask yourself, why do we have these conflict of interest laws? Why do we ask people who are working in the Justice Department to disclose what financial holdings they have or who they have relationships with? Well, the reason is, on paper, we are supposed to be able to go to our courts and have an impartial hearing where the parties involved don't have biases toward one of the parties or the other in terms of the judge or district attorneys or prosecutors. We're supposed to get a fair trial. But when we see situations where they either have holdings or their spouse has holdings or somebody in their family has holdings, financial holdings in a litigant that's coming before me, then my duty as a citizen of this country and somebody who pledged to be an unbiased judge, I must recuse. But what we see is exactly the opposite. We see judges across the country refusing, digging in their heels, and never recusing, and their argument is cockamamie. Their argument is, well, if I give in here, I'll have to give in everywhere, and everyone will try to knock me off of a case then. And I'm thinking, yeah, and what's your problem, buddy? we have such prima donnas here in our judicial system. If they've got a conflict, then get off, buddy. Stop this holier than thou monarchical attitude toward your job. It's not your court, it's the people's court, but that's not the way they act. And they're not following the ethics laws in my experience and my observation. What they're doing, they're fighting the ethics laws, and they are, I know one case where the person has sued J.P. Morgan, where the judge even has now admitted in court that he bought stock in J.P. Morgan during the case, and yet when she brought it up that he should recuse himself, he's refusing. And none of the courts on appeal are helping her. They're all letting them get away with it.
It's, as you say, they think they're monarchs. They think that they are, in fact, somehow above the rest of us. When you're a judge in a court, you act as if you're the monarch of your own kingdom. And it is absolutely disturbing. Now, let's go back for a second. Let's see if I got this right. Then the Clinton Foundation, which is a 501c charity, gets to lie on the forms that are supposed to be made public on their site, which you looked at, which have basically hidden everything in their, as you pointed out, the kind of digital invisible ink. I would call it the vanishing ink, because it's kind of a spy thing. Oh, I wrote it down. Yes, I did. It's just that it's invisible, and you need some lemon juice to put on.
Well, I think I can help people understand it very easily. When you type in a word processor and you change the color of the font, for example, what they have done is they have selected a transparent color, so it doesn't show up even though it's there. And that's what happened on the screw-up on the 2017 form. They didn't just remove it. They made it transparent. I don't know why, because they could have easily done what they'd done in the previous years. But the other thing that's completely absent, all of their forms going all the way back to 1997, is Schedule C. In Schedule C on a Form 990 is to disclose political campaign and lobbying activities. This I just pulled off the IRS website. So Schedule B is the one that exists on these various reports. That's the schedule of contributors, but the names of the contributors are blanked out, except in 2017 where it's hidden by the transparent font, and none of them have Schedule C. So if President Trump wanted to push back on all this request for his tax returns, what we need to see as citizens is the Schedule B and the Schedule C for the Form 990s for the Clinton Foundation going all the way back to 1997. And I have a simple question for you, Douglas. Why are we in 2019 and we still don't see those schedules?
Because there have been 4 investigations, perhaps even a 5th, and most of them were covered up because Andrew McCabe ran those investigations, if you remember. And Andrew McCabe and his wife Jill received from the Hillary Clinton Victory Foundation, or Campaign Foundation, I forget, that along with the money from Terry McAuliffe's state. I believe he was, wasn't he Virginia? Anyway, they donated about $700,000 to Jill's campaign, and Andrew McCabe, at the same time, was investigating Hillary Clinton on at least 3 separate investigations into the Clinton Foundation. And when he was then knocked out of his place, they started another investigation, and they loaded up a plane full of information to bring back. But we'll see if any of that works. And what I want to know is, will Trump get to use the same transparent ink as Hillary? And I'm sorry, yes. I got a cheap joke here, but it seems as if the transparent ink did anything but make their reporting transparent. What it did was it basically made it legal to lie again. Nobody's going to check. Excuse me, there have been books written, there have been movies made, there have been 3, 4, 5 investigations in the Clinton Foundation, and they can't find what you and your researchers found in a matter of minutes.
Exactly.
When you were asked a simple questions, plus what we can derive, and I will derive, and I'm not going to speculate, but I'm going to derive and I'm going to make predictions. It's very, very clear what was going on here, and if it's ever investigated, it will come out. But let's first off remember, the Clinton Foundation takes 95% of the money donated, and it gives it to the 3 Clinton members of their family for expenses. 5% maximum, and it's usually less than that, gets to the cause. And so whatever you thought you were giving to with the Clinton Foundation, 5% got there. The other money went for their expenses. Now, look on their tax forms. If you're going to look at President Trump's for the last 10 years, let's look at Clinton's for the last 10 years and see whether or not they claimed that 95% income, because Jonathan Weiner, who was one of her top aides when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, came out, and when he found out all this stuff was going down, John Carlin quit, and James Baker jumped ship, and all these people started jumping ship. He jumped ship too. And what did he say was, He said that the money for ADP, and this was before anybody even knew about ADP. It's a what is it? It's a marketing firm, more or less. Did Clinton's campaign for free, and so it was brought into the news that it should have been a campaign donation. It should have been considered as that. And then Jonathan Weiner came out and he spilled the beans on everything. 3 or 4 different times I saw him on the news when he was basically saying everything, and then he wrote an article on it too. And he said the following, and this is the shock of shocks. He said he was there and he witnessed the money being transferred, not only for the Uranium One, but also he knew about the write-off for ADP, this marketing firm, and that he was there to tell us that the Clinton Foundation is not raked in, 2 billion. It's 20 billion.
Well, I can believe that. Let me just, in 2009, their financial report has the contributors section, Schedule B, and the donations are just astounding. We don't have the names, but we have the amounts. The number one, 73,727,260. That's the first one. Second one, 115,397,489. These people are genius fundraisers. Next one. That was editorial comment. Next one, 9 million, 4, 7 million, 5, 16 million, 6, 5 million, 7 million, 7 million. I mean, these are astounding amounts of money. For someone who has been in the fundraising business, anybody that's getting that kind of donations for anything is crooked, in my experience.
And
you can't do that.
They were busy making a lot of other money, those Clintons. Let's go into that a bit. And also, here's my speculation. And I don't think it takes much to speculate on this to find the truth. Those huge amounts of money, those were from the countries that came and met with her as Secretary of State and then received either huge weapons deals or money directly out of the United States AID, the aid to...
Right. Well, that happens also, by the way, the year she first paid for the first template for winning elections to Facebook.
That's exactly right. And it's with that U.S. aid money that she was basically able to buy favors. It was a pay-to-play. So this is what would happen, and we all saw it on the news. You don't have to speculate about any of this. If you paid attention, as soon as she became the Secretary of State, she traveled to more countries than any Secretary of State in history. She went to our enemies as well as our friends, and they all kowtowed to her. And then you would find out, in a matter of a very short period of time, that they would get a new defense contract military weapon deal. Or you would hear that they had donated a huge amount of money, massive amounts, just like you're quoting there, millions and tens of millions, to the Clinton Foundation, who literally wasn't doing anything for them. In some cases, they hide it, and they'll be the middleman for pharmaceuticals for AIDS drugs, or they'll hide it and they'll create some kind of initiative like the Clinton-Justra Sustainability Growth Fund. By the way, tell me their name again.
That's on this list, by the way.
Yeah,
2017. That's on the list.
Okay. Why would it's absolutely incredible. I'm going to describe what happened there. But what is their new name? Would you check that for me as I give this little description?
Yes, it's Elevate Social Businesses.
Elevate
okay, 3 million.
Social Businesses. Now, I'm going to tell you about something that is more nefarious than the Clinton Foundation, and that is the Clinton-Justra Sustainability Growth Fund. That was the growth fund that was used to slush around the Uranium One money. That was what Frank Justra used to buy the dead uranium mine in Kazakhstan. It's the money he used to buy the American rights for uranium that was later called the Uranium One Company. He created 2 companies out of that, and then he started to do the deal with Putin himself through Rosatom. And that was an easy deal because they already had the megatons to megawatts deal where Putin was taking enriched uranium from his missiles, downgrading it, bringing it to America, enriching it in our facilities, and then selling it back to us for our own nuclear plants. What a scam! What a Ponzi deal! Well, that's what was going on.
We We just pulled the Canadian stock records on that company.
Mm-hmm.
And its current directors are David J. Foley, Frank Justra, Eric S. Nonix, and Bruce R. Lindsay.
Thank you. Please tell him who Bruce R. Lindsay is.
He is the gentleman who founded the Clinton Library nonprofit in 1997, and then was the CEO of the Clinton Foundation for many years, including all the WikiLeaks disclosures that we saw.
And he was crooked from the beginning, because in 97, that was before it was even supposed to be founded. And as you pointed this out to me before, usually we thought that the scam was the Presidential Library was turned from a charitable organization into basically a corrupt organization for the president afterwards. You know, the rogue CIA, basically the White House cabal, the White House criminal families. This is the way they do it. Obama's already done it. But what we saw with this, I love it, elevate social businesses. Oh, I love that, because before that, it was supposedly when Frank Justra gave $200 million and Carlos Slim gave over $100 million to this Sustainability Growth Fund, it was for mineral rights. It was for gold. It was for silver. And then they both made a commitment, Carlos Slim and Frank Justra, that for the rest of their life, that their gold corporation and their silver corporation would give a huge percentage, I forget, I think it's 50%, of what they make a year as their profit back to this sustainability fund. And it was all about, supposedly, mining, uranium, gold, silver. No. They've now changed it into elevate social businesses. And when you go on the site and you look up the Clinton Justra Sustainability Growth Fund, it's kind of like looking up the Clinton Foundation IRS forms. You get the biggest bag of manure that you have ever seen. They say that they go into these very third world countries and they build luxury hotels in places and cities you've never even heard of, in countries you never heard of. And that is the elevate social businesses section of it. Somehow they're elevating.
That's so their employees can have a nice place to stay when they go visit their projects.
And nobody knows whether it ever gets built. Nobody ever goes there. Nobody checks on it. And so their 501c, with people able to write off charitable donations to them. What is it really? It's simply a slush fund for people who are some of the worst rogue CIA agents. Remember, Frank Justra is fake gold. I don't want to get into that. He's just like Barrick Gold. They write paper notes on fake gold. And this has been proven recently. I had said it before, and then they went and they looked to see if this fund, this growth fund, had particularly, what is it called, Gold Corp, which is owned by Frank Justra, to see if they had the gold they said they did, and they didn't have any of it. So they've been writing paper notes on gold that doesn't exist. This is what Barrick Gold does. This is what the Rothschilds have been doing. This is what they do in Nova Scotia. There's a few places. This is what they do in Shanghai Economic Zone. They write fake paper notes on gold, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. What we're really talking about here is $20 billion to the Clinton Foundation. That doesn't count the other ones, which you pointed out from the beginning. They didn't do the library scam. They created a foundation ahead of time before they even became the president so that they could start slushing this money from the beginning, because they'd been doing it in Arkansas and they'd been working the whole rogue CIA with Mena, Arkansas, the whole thing. As well as...
Well, let me ask you this, what you mean by that, because 1997 is the first Arkansas record that we see that had the Clinton Foundation associated with it. So you're saying they started forming earlier corporations? I haven't seen those.
No, I'm saying that they were already corrupt ahead of time, because the Chinese moved in to Arkansas and taken over Arkansas. That's Sam Walton. You know, Sam Walton didn't become...
Right.
The Walton family didn't do what they did because they were Arkansas Hicks, okay?
Right.
No, that was the Chinese takeover of northern Arkansas. And what is it? Tyson Chicken took over northwestern Arkansas. And right smack dab in central northern Arkansas is where where Iran-Contra was coordinated by Bill Clinton himself out of Mena, Arkansas. So their corruption is fantastic. So before they became president, they already set this up in 97, right?
Right.
Well, then they had this plan from the beginning, but that's who they are.
Right.
Remember, Terry McAuliffe was a founding member of the Clinton Foundation. Jonathan Weiner was one of the members of the Clinton Foundation. All these people, the more corrupt you are, the more deeply your connection to the Clinton Foundation. And yes, I agree with you. If they get to use vanishing ink, invisible ink, transparent font, then so does Donald Trump when he turns in his tax forms, but he won't need to because he's not hiding anything. I would love to see the true tax forms for the Clinton Foundation, which after all this time, it's illegal for them not to post it on their site, by the way. I've run many 501c3, and you must post and you must make it visible for the entire public because you're using your tax-free status and you can lose it if you lie one time. Well, they lie all the time. They weren't even asked to fill in the names of the blanks. And the blanks, Fidelity was in one of those blanks. Here's who was in the rest of those blanks. That would be Qatar. That would be the United Arab Emirates. That would be Israel. That would be Syria. That would be Iran. That would be Saudi Arabia. That would be France, Britain. Everyone donated to the Clinton Foundation when Hillary was the Secretary of State, and everybody knows it because we saw it on the television, and we basically saw them brag about it. Now, go to their IRS forms as you have and your researchers have, and what do you find? Invisible ink.
Yes, invisible ink. Well, if we swing this back around to what this proves with hard evidence, not hearsay, not newspaper articles, but actual hard evidence that a judge can use that Fidelity and Hillary have a relationship, and therefore anybody involved with or was selected by any of these people to be involved in the special counsel investigation that had Fidelity stock have, by their involvement, tainted the investigation and have created what's called the fruit of the poisonous tree, which means anything they've done with evidence that touched their hands is poisoned. And therefore, everyone who has been persecuted by this special counsel needs to be released, in my opinion, and there needs to be restitution.
Absolutely. And making it even more disgusting, Jeannie Rhee represented Hillary Clinton when she was charged with racketeering, corruption, and the Benghazi scandal, lying. And she got her off. Isn't that lovely? Matter of fact, Jeannie Rhee must be another one of these amazing geniuses. But what we see here is...
Well, let me point out what Jeannie Rhee, because when you actually dig into her background, what you discover is a lot of fluff words about her being an experienced prosecutor, when in fact it doesn't appear that she has done anything since her Yale law days except work either for Wilmer Hale, i.e. Mueller, or the Department of Justice, and she swung back and forth between the two. Those aren't real jobs. And yet she's an experienced prosecutor just because she has followed orders from, obviously, the people who are grooming her. That's obvious to me, anyway.
Oh, yes. And Matt Gaetz and Rand Paul, I believe it was, both of them have put new bills on the floor saying that we can't have two-tier justice system. If you lie to Congress and you're Roger Stone, or say Paul Manafort or George Papadopoulos or anybody else, any of the low-level people, they go to jail. But if you're a Hillary Clinton, if you're Andrew McCabe, if you're a Comey, if you're a Mueller, no, it's a second tier. It's a tier of justice where you are not prosecuted because your lawyer knows that you can lie to Congress. And so now they're going to say no more lying to Congress and no more two-tiered justice system. If you lie...
You know what, Doug? Mm-hmm. We did that interview on the False Statements Accountability Act. And one of the hilarious things that we've seen out in the internet since that interview is various attorneys trying to argue that subsection B doesn't really exempt everyone. It only the argument is it only exempts people who are going before a court, but it doesn't exempt them if they're testifying to Congress. That's their argument. Oh, I just think that's a hilarious argument because it's acknowledging that there is a two-tiered system right there by saying, oh, you can lie there, but you can't lie there. We get to pick. And these attorneys, the whole profession appears to be suffering from a type of dysfunction that you see in an alcoholic family, and we've had some experience that in our family, where it's something called codependency. That if you choose to live around somebody who is an alcoholic and don't really have a choice, you become a codependent. In other words, you adapt your behavior to walk around their dysfunction, and you, as a result, become dysfunctional. And that's what I see in the legal profession, that even if somebody's, quote, a good guy, they've had to dance around the dysfunction so much that they are actually enabling the continuing corruption by not speaking up. And that seems to be one of the things we as citizens are suffering here. We're suffering from a completely dysfunctional legal system where everyone in it has become a codependent.
And congressional oversight has become a joke. Congress has the ability to hold you in contempt of Congress when you testify. They can simply direct the Department of Justice and the FBI to indict you. So there is no such thing as lying before Congress. That is just a standard that has been created with these laws that you've pointed out by very, very corrupt Washington, D.C. lawyers, probably the worst one that there is, Chandler, and that this is just the way for them to always have their get-out-of-jail-free card. It's the way for them to always have pure impunity to act any way they want. And so they used to believe they could go and perjure themselves all they want, or just, deflect the questions, or basically not answer the questions of those who are supposed to be in Congress oversight for these federal agencies who work for the executive branch. But now we have the case that the Department of Justice stands against congressional investigations. The Department of Justice, the FBI, stands against the executive branch, their boss. And they basically have done whatever they wanted. And so this is like complete lawlessness in the court system and almost a war of all against all. Grab everything you can on the way out.
Well, you and I have talked about this before, and you probably thought it was a little bit funny that I was advocating that you need to put civil engineers in charge of these tasks and that we'd see this system fixed fairly quickly. Let me just give you an example. I was talking with an architect at church, and we were talking about corruption. And I said, let me give you an example. What I see is that when attorneys see the other attorney lying, and even lying to a court, they hardly ever report that person to the judge under the moniker of there, but by the grace of God go I. So they don't say anything about all of the corruption they see. And therefore, the other person who was lying gets away with it. And so I gave this person an example. I said, and this is a very skilled architect, and I said, okay, Jim, let's say you observe on a construction project the contractor putting in defective materials in the foundation. Are you going to report him? And he said, of course. I said, there's the difference. Because architects and engineers and people who have to build things that actually work won't let that go on because they know the public safety is directly threatened if somebody tries to cut corners in a construction project. But our lawyers don't do that. Our judges don't do that. They cover for each other. And we are just as harmed as citizens as if we let engineers get away with bad workmanship.
Yeah, the only difference is you're held culpable. As an engineer, you're held culpable. And corporations are not held culpable. And judges are not even held responsible, even when they make wrong decisions after wrong decisions, even when every decision they make is overturned in an appellate court, doesn't affect them whatsoever. They act as if they are completely above the law themselves. Well, I think the point here is that you have made an amazing discovery in something in a Clinton Foundation IRS document that no one else has ever revealed, which shows the amazing conflict of interest and the necessity for most people, or at least the top people on the Mueller special counsel investigation, to recuse themselves, and that it's directly all fruit from a poisonous tree, and that if you look closely, it seems as if it is a conspiracy of criminals impersonating law enforcement officers who are in fact conducting an illegal CIA counterintelligence operation coup against our sitting president. And that is disturbing. That needs to be brought before the next time Roger Stone has to stand before the grand jury. That needs to be brought when Paul Manafort is brought for his plea deal, or when he is brought for sentencing.
If you look at all of the companies that Fidelity has invested in, here's part of the dysfunction that I see just looking at these names. There are so many corporations that are under the spell of Fidelity that it's just off the charts. You see the same thing with Vanguard, and you see the same thing with T. Rowe Price. It appears to me that these mutual funds were some sort of regulatory go-to groups for the takeover. That eventually, it's clear the SEC is not monitoring or policing these certain companies. And so what we see is that the Clinton Foundation is able to completely take out Schedule C from their disclosures to the public, so we don't know what kind of political campaigning or lobbying they were doing. Presumably they reported something. And then on Schedule B, they left the schedule in, but they blanked out the contributors, and nobody has said this is wrong. The IRS should be all over this.
Well, I think it demonstrates that our federal agencies are complete failures, that the senior executive service members who run the bureaucratic status quo, making sure that nothing ever changes, no matter whether it's in the court system, even right up to the White House, certainly in the Supreme Court and throughout the military. It is time for us to start to really see real justice. So with the discovery that you've made here with Fidelity, we need to see that come before Robert Mueller's grand jury indictment and have it basically abnegate that entire investigation. That or one of the many other things that Andrew Weissman has done, or Jeannie Rhee has done, or Strzok and Page, Bruce Orr. All of these things should have ended the special counsel investigation a long, long time ago. So, Michael, I want to thank you for going down in those mines and taking me down there with you today and showing me how you pull things up.
I was glad to have you.
Oh,
Did you see the canary?
The air was thin. I don't know how you do it. It's dark down there. But I know one thing. You keep pulling up nuggets, and these nuggets on Hillary Clinton seem to have found out more than 3 or 4 federal investigations on the Clinton Foundation didn't seem to notice anything that you and your researchers noticed in your first pass at it. So thank you again for this amazing research.
That just goes to show you, Douglas. Some people say, well, this problem is too big for me. And I keep thinking think what happens when you're in a completely dark room and you light a candle. And I think that's what's happening here, is that patriots all over the planet are lighting candles. And now it's starting to burn brighter and brighter.
And it only takes one candle for everyone else to light their candle off of that. And if you've seen it spread through a crowd when they do that, it's like a wave. And that's what we're working on. We want to reach the place where we have critical mass of consciousness, so that when we bring these things forward, someone in the government, some whistleblower, some white hat stands up and says, oh my goodness, I should look where those investigators, those citizen journalists have pointed, and lo and behold, you'll have the indictable evidence to put the criminals in D.C. in jail and to let them meet the justice that they so absolutely deserve.